Appreciate it. Awesome. And if another person could just keep an eye on the waiting room and just keep admitting people, that'd be helpful.
I can do that.
Thanks, Cody.
Oh boy.
Make some housekeeping announcements as well.
12 to 14 were out of school. 6% out of school.
Hey, welcome everyone. This is Katie Elder, PMC Development Specialist. Thank you so much for joining us today for this virtual event. We are letting people come in the room, so we've got quite a big crowd today, which is really, really exciting. I just want to do a few housekeeping things at the top of the hour. If you could keep yourselves muted during the program, we'll allow for question and answers towards the end. So if you'll find on your screen your little microphone image and just click that and it'll turn red, that'll mean you're muted while the program's going on. And we have some co-hosts that'll help out with that if you can't find it. And then another thing, just one homework assignment, if you could pull up the chat box and type in where you're logging in from so we can see who's from where across the world. We've got a big international crowd today, which is very exciting. So if you could pull up that chat box and share where you're from and where you're logging in from today. And with that, I won't take up too much time. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our founder and president, Bill Ryerson. We've just celebrated 25 years of PMC, so round of applause for Bill and team. He is in Uganda right now, so if there's a little bit of a delay, let's just all, work with it. And Bill, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. And we've been having a fantastic week and a half so far in Kenya last week and Uganda this week. We've met with several embassies, foundations, UN agencies, and there is true excitement about what PMC brings to the table that's different from most other organizations that work in gender reproductive health, either in service or communication. So we've really gotten a very positive response. In fact, one donor today said, "Can I quit my job and come work for Population Media Center?" So that's a good indication that they like what we're doing. Let me set the table a little bit about Uganda. I was refamiliarizing myself last night with the statistics here. And, this is a country with very high rates of growth in numbers and very high birth rates. So about 5 children per woman. But the men who make a lot of the decisions in a lot of families in Uganda want 7 children. So you can talk about IUDs and condoms all you want, and it won't change anything unless you start getting the men on board with the realization of the benefits for health and welfare of child spacing, family size limitation, and in fact, that the real way to be masculine is to have a family you can care for and send all your kids through school. So it's very clear that what PMC offers in terms of its programming can be very effective. We've done 2 programs here so far, one in the Luganda language and one in English, funded by the British government over the last few years, just ended last year. And they had significant effects on several indicators. So, for example, family planning use went up, belief in both personal, spousal, and community approval of family planning. And of course, that's a very important indicator because people want to be sort of working within the community norms, fitting in. So it's really important that people came to realize that their spouses, sometimes they may never have talked about this, probably support family planning and feel free to have the conversation that's so critical to beginning use of family planning. and that their communities are supportive of it. And there have been very big shifts between listeners compared to non-listeners with regard to prevention of gender-based violence or violence against women. And this is a big issue, both in terms of a human rights issue for the rights of women and girls, and because if a woman is the victim of abuse, she's not going to be in a position to bring up a discussion about family size or family planning with her partner. So this is an important indicator for us. And PMC, unlike any other organization I know of, has a whole strategy for addressing gender-based violence. We were approached some years ago by a psychologist who was doing a fellowship with Stanford psychologist Albert Bandura, and she mentioned that she was an expert in the psychology related to violence and the victim's psychology, and depression, and that sets in when a woman is a long-term victim of violence, and that she was an expert in what is called PrEP, Prevention and Relationship Enhancement Program, something created by University of Denver psychologist Howard Markman, that really when couples are involved in violent relationships and you can get the battering man to go for 2 weeks of counseling, this program that teaches them empathetic communications so they learn to understand the other person's point of view before they state their own, has been shown by World Health Organization to dramatically reduce tendencies to violence when a disagreement occurs. So in fact, you end up with a couple, they still may have a disagreement, but they're talking rationally about it and negotiating as opposed to resorting to dehumanization and violence. And so because around the world, people don't have access to this kind of counseling, what we did some years ago was get funding from UNICEF and the American Psychological Foundation for this specialist to create a manual for how to role model empathetic communications in entertainment media like serial dramas. And she came to Africa and did 2 training workshops for our writing teams. And it resulted in letters to her from some of the writers saying how much the training had improved their own married lives, let alone the fact that they were now using characters to role model empathetic communications for the whole nation. So this is something that I think is of great interest. We had a meeting today with UN Women, and by the time we got back to the hotel, where they had posted a photo of their meeting with us, the head of communications there is really eager to see PMC do another set of programs in partnership with the UN. Our last programs here were done in partnership with a Planned Parenthood type international organization based in London called Marie Stopes International, and they received British funding, and we were part of their bid for that contract, which was limited in scope to a small number of radio stations, only 2 languages, whereas we should really be doing 6 or 8. So there's a whole lot more we could do. And we also really want to have much more promotion of the program so that people know about it, because they don't just automatically turn on the radio and listen if they don't know the program is there. So next time around, both with perhaps a rerun of the Uganda language program and with new programs we may produce, we hope to have a much bigger impact than we did. But the impact here was sizable, and it also shows impact in other areas that were dealt with in the program, like breastfeeding and understanding the rights of women and girls, and critically important, significant change in ideal family size, reduction to smaller family size norms, which, as I was mentioning earlier, is really very important, particularly among men, because contraception is irrelevant if you want more and more children. So we really start with the why of family planning and not the what of family planning in our programs. And I wouldn't even say the programs are about family planning, but they incorporate this into the lives of the characters as they evolve and they're thinking about their whole family life. And we've also seen other types of maternal and child health indicators show very positive changes. And so we're really pleased with what has happened here, and we are now just 2 days into this trip, optimistic that we will obtain funding for another set of programs in the immediate future. And maybe that's a good place for me to stop. And maybe Ronald could talk a little bit more about the actual programs. He does speak Luganda. I don't. I can just say a couple words.
Thank you, Bill. I might take the stand for a little bit. I
Oh,
would just
great.
like to introduce, Ronald Auger, our country director for Uganda, who has been hosting us for this week. And well, many of you might know me, many of you might not know me. My name is Natalia Cerecer. I am the Vice President of International Programs, and I support all the countries. And as Bill just said, we're both right now traveling, also seeking funds for this very important mission that it's really what's connecting all of us to be here tonight for us during lunch for you. So thank you so much for your time. I will doing, just so it's a little more interesting, a few round of questions. Please feel free to start, writing any comments that you might want into the chat. We will have people looking for them. And then as always, we will have some time for some Q&As toward the end. So why don't we start then? So I will do the first question to Ronald. Ronald? Ronald
Yes,
is currently
can you
in
hear
our...
me?
Yes, perfectly.
Ah.
And we can see you as well, Ronald. So Ronald is in our current office in Uganda. And as you could see, Bill and I are in the hotel just so we could have better signal so the conversation could be more fluid for all of us. So Ronald, my first question for you is, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your role as a CD in one of our Africa countries, Uganda?
All right, thanks, Nati. And I'm using the video, I really do. So if you feel the picture is pausing a little bit because of the internet, please let me know. I can then switch off the video. At least people already see and can attach a name to a face. But there's a hand, I don't know whether you want to deal with that now. I think Bill Harris has a hand up. Should I just go ahead? I can see Bill
Yes.
Harris has a hand up.
Yes, I did raise my hand.
Sure. Do you want to go ahead? Did you had a question before, or would you like to wait for the Q&As?
I have the following question. Is there any special program aimed at teenage males, teenage boys in this whole project of assisting family planning?
Are we including the target of younger boys?
Yes.
Okay. Bill, I don't know, do you want to answer to that, or
Sure.
Ronald can answer, or I can answer?
I'm happy to. Ronald can add detail, but and Natty, I was so focused on some of our results here, I forgot to introduce you. But Natty, as she mentioned, is our VP for International Programs. She previously was country director in Guatemala and then director of innovation, which she's doing a lot of, and she can tell you about it in some of our country projects. So reaching young boys is critically important, and we're one of the few organizations, again, in the reproductive health space and gender space that focuses equally on males, because they're making a lot of the decisions. Boys grow up witnessing violence, witnessing huge families, and see that as normal. And so it's critically important to start changing those norms young. And in fact, in some of the conversations we've been having, people have been saying, don't limit it to 14, 15, 16-year-old boys. We need to start at 10, because by that point, they're already starting to form a lot of their opinions and behaviors. So I think in our next project, we'll focus extensively on positive male role models again, using the methodology, which many of you know about, starting with key identification characters right in the middle of the road who get buffeted by conflicting advice from positive and negative characters, and then gradually sort out that advice and evolve into positive role models, but only after the audience has formed very strong bonds with them. So yes, we've had that as a major target here of teen age males and females. And we've also been talking in some of our meetings here about the electronic game we created in partnership with the Emergent Media Center of Champlain College that is all about bullying and violence, but it's a game set in a soccer theme. So players are scoring and defending goals, but in the process of various narrative events in the 6 episodes of the game, they're learning to deal with gender-based violence, particularly bullying and violence against girls by boys. And we've used this in a number of camp settings with youth groups and in schools with facilitators, and it's been highly effective at addressing those issues. So we have more than just broadcast programs that PMC is doing. And Natty or Ronald, over to you in terms of what we've done here in focusing on this age group in Uganda.
Ronald, if you want, I can give you the floor.
All right.
And
I'll
we
just
can come back to your, then we probably can come back to your question. And then don't worry, I'm taking notes and I've been seeing the hands. So, you know,
Yeah.
we can probably have 1 or 2 questions, you know, that I have prepared, and definitely then open the floor to you guys because this event is for you. So no worries. So Ronald, maybe you can complement the question with the 2 serial dramas that we have already developed in the last 5 years here in Uganda. And then we can go back to, you know, tell us a little bit about yourself so people can also get to know you.
All right, thank you very much, Natty. I'll make it quick because I think people are ready to engage, which is a good thing. So even before I talk about the dramas we did under the RISE program, as a country, so there's what we call gender, or what you want, male involvement as a strategy. So what we're doing, be it family planning, the boys or the males target alongside the girls, because it doesn't make sense for you to empower one side of the story, whereas it's not supported by the other side of things. So as a policy, male involvement is big in programming in Uganda here, and bringing it home to what we did under the RISE. So we had, so the goal of the RISE program was to increase modern contraception among the adults, the marrieds, but also among the young people. And so the young people, we didn't discriminate and target just the girls. So the target was both the girls and the boys. So it's basically the policy of leaving no one behind. So the boys and the girls are always, you know, a target at the same time, because they do complement each other. And just like Bill was talking before, issues of family planning, for example, you will find, like in a country like Uganda, much as the woman takes the contraception most of the times, the power to do that lies with the men. So it's important that you don't leave one sex out of it. So that's why it moves in unison. Both sexes are targeted and engaged. So that's quickly. Now, let me speak about myself so that people can know who I am, and I'll make it quick. My name is Ronald Ahirire. I'm a Ugandan by birth and by inclination, born and bred here in Uganda, happy to be. Uganda is the pearl of Africa, before I forget, and it should be part of your bucket list to visit this country. I saw a colleague of ours here, Florence. Yeah, Florence can bear witness. It should be part of your agenda to come visit Uganda. So I'm married. I'm a married man with 1 wife and 3 kids. And so what inspires me in life is my family. So I owe everything to my family. And I think the greatest thing I would like to see is my family living a good life, especially my children who are still coming up. And that's very pivotal for me. And in fact, I just thought about this, Natty. It was one of the reasons that informed my choice of how many children I should have, but I had never, talked about it, but it's basically because of the economics. I want to see my family having a good life, and I can only manage, a certain number. So I'm so inspired by my family. So that's me. I've gone to school. I'm one of the educated people in Uganda. So I've gone to university, done communication, done management, done drama as well. And I'll tell you a story about that later. But as the country director for Population Media Center Uganda, I want to summarize it as someone that keeps the mission and the vision of PMC alive here in Uganda. So that comes with many things, be it being a team leader to my colleagues here, be it, building and maintaining relationships with the government, with the donors and other partners, being resource mobilization, because I want to see this office grow and do more great things in the future. We've been here for 5 years, but I'm happy that in these 5 years, we've been able to do, some good work. So as a country director, whatever I do, whatever decision I make, at the back of my mind, there's the PMC mission, there's the PMC vision. That should be my guiding star in whatever I decide to do. So I would say I am the lead face and the lead voice of PMC here in Uganda. So I think that should do for now, Nati, so that we can leave enough time and people can maybe ask more questions later.
Sure. I
Yeah.
had one extra question that I would like to ask you and Bill, and then we can definitely move toward some of the Q&As for the audience. So we know, Bill, that we have had 2 projects here in Uganda, and that we have definitely, have some success stories coming out of those. So can you tell us a little bit about those? And then I'll come back to you, Ronald, with the other flip of the coin, right? Like, what are the challenges that we are also faced through those projects and in the future? Yes, Bill, go ahead.
Well, I mentioned quite a number of the data success stories that came out of this first program. I mean, one of the things people often don't understand is we're doing programs that are multi-issue programs about life in the country. So we're addressing family life, family relationships, romance, safe relationships, etc. And we're able to measure numerous changes in behavior by the audience on numerous indicators. So, for example, maternal health and breastfeeding increased among listeners at the same time that family planning use and positive attitudes towards family planning and positive attitudes towards smaller families all shifted. So I think, this was for our first program in Uganda, in a country that has a population doubling time of maybe 23 years. It's critically important to start moving the needle. And what we've learned from some of the donors in the first 2 days of this week is that, with that exception, most of the programs being done here have not been shifting norms. So we're really happy to be doing work here, and we see our presence here as a long-term urgent need for the welfare of the roughly 30 million people who live here, and for the sustainability and health and welfare of the people of East Africa. So it's for us a very important country, and one thing I wanted to mention in this call is we're very thankful to all of our donors, many of whom are on this call, for supporting our work all over the world. And this is a country where there is tremendous need that we keep hearing from UN agencies and embassies for this type of programming.
Thank you. Now back to you, Ronald. As we know, you had very good results, although a lot of constraints around the budget that was given to us, by the prime of the project. Can you tell us a little bit around those challenges, really, and how you're envisioning that the project should be in the future?
All right, so we engaged on the RISE program that I talked about, and we had some good results, but we also had some lessons that we took that should, help us inform our next, actions. And there were, I think the major ones were really 3 of them. And one of them, for the folks that might not be aware about Uganda that much, Uganda is a country that has more than 70 languages spoken in this country by different groups of people. So if you're talking about doing a program in a local language, that will call for you to do 70 different programs. Because you need to communicate in people's languages so that they can understand, feel, and kind of get to the depth of what you're communicating. So number one was the language factor. So there were many languages, and we couldn't get the budget to at least communicate in the major languages. So that was a problem. And so to compromise, because the pass was not as elastic, to compromise was to do one program in local language and then the other in English. But you can imagine Uganda with low levels of literacy, and they are listening to a program in English. It really doesn't work, and PMC rarely does that, but it was a compromise. So that was number one, the language factor. Had we had more languages, we could have reached more people, and maybe the impact would have, been bigger. Number two was about promotion. I think for people who believe in the Bible, I believe in the Bible a bit, not so much. I think somewhere it said that what's the point of lighting, I think, a lantern, and then you cover it. So we had a good program. We know it's been tested in many other countries. We know how PMC methodology can create impact. But you see, it's useless if you have a good product and you don't put it out there for people to listen to. So we had that problem. We couldn't reach many people because we didn't have many radio stations to air that. We had 13 radio stations, but in Uganda, we have over 300 radio stations. So you can really see that the percentage of the stations. So we were limited on the stations, and in Uganda, radio has the biggest reach. Most people are reached by radio. So we would have wanted to be on more radios so we can reach more people. So also, we needed to promote this show, because if you don't promote it, people will not get to know about it. But Nati mentioned today, I remember somewhere, we had a promotion budget of 20,000. And 20,000, if you're looking at the kind of geographical scope we are dealing with, it was really not going to be very impactful. So those three were basically the bottlenecks that were, on our way to success. But we took them as lessons, and moving forward, we hope we can do much better and I want to add that quantitatively, you could say we didn't reach the kind of numbers we wanted, but we did a mini survey, a qualitative mini survey, that showed us that for those who were listening, the impact was really felt. Because I remember 50% of the sample that we talked, and these were listeners. So we are sampling listeners and trying to test what kind of impact has been, meted onto the listeners. So 50% said they had gained increasing knowledge, and 30% had changed a bit of their behavior and attitude. And that was just a small sample. So that tells you that had we reached more people, had we been on maybe more stations, had we promoted these great shows, I think we would have had a great impact. Back to you, Nati.
Thank you. So definitely, as Ronald is pointing out, usually when we work with certain donors, there's be some restrictions around the budget. We do know that in order for our methodology to really work, we do need scale. We do need the most amount of ears that we can reach in order to carry our message and take our different characters through the whole journey so people can walk with us. We do have a very winner product. The great thing is this radio drama, it's already produced. So a big chunk of the portion, it's already done. We're really looking forward finding extra funds in order to disseminate this, just to have enough radio stations and to promote it. So then we can definitely make a much higher impact, and then also do a lot of our evaluation, which is very important for us, so we can continue to show the impact that we do at our different projects. So this is why for us, it was so important just for you guys to have the visibility of how much work we're really putting in the ground, really in our countries. But this is why it's so important also for you to, first of all, as Bill was saying, thank you so much for all this work, because if all of these donations, all of this investment on time and money that you're doing, a lot of our mission will not be possible. But definitely, as everything, we always need a little more. So just really inviting you guys to seek inside your hearts and your pockets to help us a little more and try to move the needle in Uganda, because as Bill said, there's lots of needs. And through the way we're addressing these projects, and I saw a lot of comments around education, all of these are combined just by showing people, how gender violence, how important it is to put the girls in school in order to then be self-efficacy, how they can then turn into a reinvestment. Because right now, a lot of people are seeing girls as just a burden inside the house. This is why they want them married as soon as possible. They just see them as one extra mouth to feed. But once they have already, been through school and then return home with a better title, they just increase everything in the home, all the quality of living. So just showing that possibilities through our shows, it's really giving these girls a chance to have a much better life, but not only them, but the whole family as they come together. So this is why we usually talk upon all of these issues through a project, because it's not only the issue we're addressing. We are creating full stories around this. And this just gives us the opportunity to re-engage with all these other topics that are very, very connected to a person's lives. So as I was saying, I will now open the floor. I think, Katie, you can definitely, lead the different questions, and we are here, happy to help. We're in the country, in the field, just trying to get as much funds as we can, because as all of you, we really do believe in this mission, and we do believe that all of us are responsible to just make this a better world. So off to you, Katie.
Thank you, Natty. I do see 2 hands up. We can take those questions first. If you also want to put your question or comment in the chat box, we have a few co-hosts that will help keep an eye on that and relay them as well as we can. You're also welcome to hit that raise hand button, and we'll just work our way around the screen. Hal, I saw yours up if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, and I put in the chat the question, what might be done to promote girls' middle and high school education, or even co-ed education? As my experience over 50 years ago as a researcher living in rural Western Tanzania, when I visited and gave a talk to the Livingston Rural School, was that while there are about 400 boys in the lecture hall when I was giving my talk, no girls at all. And when one of the middle school boys raised his hand and asked, "What is sexual reproduction?" and I spent 10 or 15 minutes explaining it, this was kind of shocking to the teachers afterwards, who remarked on it as I left the facility. And of course, that was over half a century ago. And more recently in Washington, at a Population Connection event, I met a outstanding young woman who was from rural Kenya, apparently. And she, after talking with her for a while, I got the impression nothing much had changed. So the value of education for women and the self-confidence, choice, and discretion that comes with education, no less birth control and planning on a family, is so important then as it is now. And I wonder if Mr. Ryerson or anyone else could imagine how you could work with existing educational institutions. I mean, here where I am in Western New York, it's very hard to even step into a school unless you have a gatekeeper that invites you. You can't just show up and say, here I am. So I'd love to hear any comments. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, to respond to that question. Thank you, Hal. You know, one of our highest priorities is stopping child marriage. And I'll just give you two statistics that show how effective our approaches on that issue have been. So in Senegal, after a storyline that dealt with child marriage, listeners were 6.3 times as likely as non-listeners to believe a woman should be at least 18 to be married. In Nepal, where we've done several programs dealing with child marriage, listeners reported intervening to stop a child from being married at 2.1 times the rate of non-listeners. So these programs are having big effects, and stopping child marriage and encouraging the alternative, sending daughters to school, is critically important, because we know from statistics in virtually every country that for each additional year of high school, the ultimate fertility rate of a woman will go down. So it is acting, one, to delay marriage and childbearing, and two, to educate the mother, the eventual mother, to the benefits of child spacing for both economic reasons and health reasons. So it's very clear education is critically important. You talked about sex education. The status of sexuality education here is not much better than the United States. So it's a political football. At one point, there was a policy adopted, but then the reactionary forces rose up and said, no, not in our schools. And so because young people in Uganda, let alone the United States and a lot of other places, they're not being educated in formal settings on a critical subject, it's all that much more critical to have informal education through entertainment media. And entertainment, believe it or not, is one of the best means of educating people, because their emotional involvement leads them to remember for decades what they learned from the characters, as opposed to, say, the calculus class we may all have taken 30 years ago and only remembered it long enough to take the final exam. So, you know, it's really very important for us to be working to help people understand some of the benefits of various behaviors, including child spacing, so that they're motivated to achieve a healthy and economically well-off life. By the way, while I'm answering your question, I'm going to deviate a little bit just to recognize Florence Blondell. She is a member of our program advisory board, as was said earlier, but she is here from Uganda, but living in the United States, and she's been an outspoken advocate of our work. And I also want to recognize John Lamb, who brought me to Uganda decades ago and drove me all over the place, even out to Western Uganda, the Kabarola district, encouraging various people to get involved in supporting PMC setting up shop here, which obviously we now have, but a couple of people who played a key role for us in Uganda. So thank you. Natty, back to you.
Thanks.
Thank
Or
you.
Katie, if you're asking.
Yeah,
questions.
no problem.
Yeah.
Karen has her hand up. So Karen, I'll let you unmute and ask your question. If Karen's still thinking about it. John Lamb also had a question in the chat about the national climate for promotion of family planning. He said the current president used to encourage larger families because he believed it was better for the economy. Has that changed in any way? Ronald, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I quickly come on that, but just addition to Bill's submission. So one is universal primary education in Uganda is a government policy. So everyone is encouraged, be it girls. But you see, that's at policy level, that's at a macro level. Because of the barriers that exist at family, community level, individual level, it makes it difficult for the girl to go to school, stay in school, later on thrive in school. So much as at a macro level, it's a policy. there are things that we must address. And I think our methodology is best suited for that, so that that girl who has a right by policy to go to school and thrive can actually do that. So I think that's where we can focus. Now, again, almost like this, policy-wise, family planning is very supported, even by the president himself. But you see what happens, the president is a politician, just like other members of parliament. So once in a while, he throws comments, which of course take us back at some point. But when you look at the policy environment, family planning is encouraged. He has signed policies. But as a politician, once in a while, because of political, political benefit, he will make a comment or two. In fact, for me, the biggest barrier that we need to deal with are some of the religious sects. Those are vocal about it. Those are vocal and they don't change their position. But at least the president has a semblance of, allowing a bit of it. So which is a challenge, and people doing policy advocacy and budget advocacy are dealing with that. But it's a ball game, really, that's played by politicians.
Katie, I'd like to add to Ronald's answer, which is we have a board member here named Jotham Musangusi. He just stepped down from running the National Population Council of the government. I've known him for a few decades, and he's been very encouraging for PMC's work. He convinced President Museveni that it was important to space and limit family size in order to achieve what's called the demographic dividend. So as family size goes down, people have a little money left over at the end of the month. They can spend it on elective goods, stimulating manufacturing. They can put it in the bank, creating a capital marketplace. Businesses can borrow and expand. That drives up demand for employees. That drives up wages. That creates a middle class. That allows the government to tax those rising wages and create schools, roads, and other infrastructure that increases economic productivity. And people can put some of their leftover money into education, which also increases economic productivity. So Jotham walked the president through this, and I had the great fortune of being in the room when the president, for the very first time, endorsed family planning. Prior to Jotham getting to him with this information, he was telling women in Uganda they should have 12 children. So this is a huge sea change in leadership. And as people we met with at the US Embassy today said, this has opened all the floodgates for being out there promoting and providing family planning services. So this was a very important policy change. One other thing I wanted to mention, going back to Hal's question, is it is relatively easy to get people in favor of educating their daughters. You can do that with a program of the length we generally do. And we've seen dramatic changes in attitudes about girls' education among our listeners. But on the other hand, the cost of sending kids to school is not what we're used to in the US. It's not free education. People have to buy uniforms. They have to pay to send their kids even to public schools. So there is a financial barrier. And some of the big donor agencies that we've met with are actually providing bursaries, as they call them, for covering girls' education, so scholarship support. And that combined with changing particularly male attitudes towards girls' education is, I think, what's needed throughout Africa to get many African countries out of the trap they're in of poverty and moving towards a middle income status. Katie, back to you.
Thanks, Bill. I think Karen was working on a few technical issues to get her question in the
During the
chat.
pandemic, we've all become comfortable with Zoom and its little glitches.
Yeah, which is no problem. I know, Pat, you had asked a question about women having meaningful income and jobs. Is that happening in Uganda for the men to see women working, and if they are not burdened with childcare, they can flourish in the economy as well as at home, and what that looks like?
Ronald, do you want to start with that, or should I? Well, I'll start because I'm not hearing Ronald. So yes, women have lots of job opportunities, particularly if they're educated. And one of the great positive feedback loops on girls being educated and women working in the workplace is that when they are bringing in an income stream to the family, the husbands suddenly realize they don't want that income stream interrupted. So they support the idea of family planning so that they can continue to have dual income. So it's something that is a virtuous cycle here and everywhere we've worked. And, you know, that's one of the things that characters in our serial dramas can get across to an audience who is thinking that you need to have 15 kids to show you're macho. Whereas in fact, no, the real positive masculinity would lead to having only the number of children you can afford to care for and feed, and have a small enough family that each child can be fully educated and ultimately employed.
Thanks, Bill. We have another question from Seth. He says, in the past, we've talked about funding models for PMC. Have you found new sources of funding that reduce PMC's dependency on project-related grants?
That's a good question, Seth, and hello to you. Seth got us involved in working in on bride kidnapping in Kyrgyzstan some years ago, which is basically a marriage by abduction. We are still primarily dependent on philanthropic support, individuals, foundations, UN agencies, and governments. And we have multiple governments that support our work. It's not just the US, but many European governments and even the government of Ethiopia have funded PMC's work. But we, I think, are moving increasingly towards a semi-commercial model. You probably, many of you know, we did a program in Hollywood that I was assured we would never get on the air, and it became the longest running program in the history of the network Hulu. It was one of 8 networks that wanted it because it was so well done, and it dealt with teen pregnancy, and it ran from 2013 to 2017. That program is still making money for us. And in some African countries, we have had commercial sponsors. So a bank in Nigeria, and our characters were opening their bank accounts at that bank. Bayer, with their microgynon contraceptive, sponsored us in Ethiopia. And with Natty on board, coming out of the commercial sector, and particularly advertising and media buying, she's really intent on building our private support through that kind of commercial partnership. So we see that as an important way to build our sustainability as an organization.
Thanks, Bill. If anyone else has a question and they'd like to unmute themselves to ask it, you're welcome.
Maybe if you want, I can circle back to Karen because she's been sharing, you know, some notes with us that she has this project of 67 girls in secondary schools.
Okay.
You know, and now they're turning pregnant, and she was talking, you know, about the different language barriers, also how just having products available really increase, you know, the reduction of pregnancy. However, it was very connected, and Karen, you correct me if I'm wrong, to having a right doctor in place. So, you know, this is why we can't just only rely on the service providers, because if you don't have the will to change, and this is really where we are building bridges through communication, because we are changing the people's will in order to seek these services. We have been having conversations this week and last week in Kenya also with different service providers saying that all the services in place, they have clinics, they have methods, but a lot of people are just not going there, right? Because of different barriers that they have, you know, starting with the amount of children that they want, you know, around myths, saying that anti-contraceptives are dangerous. So all of these things are definitely things that we are addressing toward our shows. And just, by engaging people, we can definitely teach them a lot more around this. So then we just not only rely on service provision, which is very important to have it available, but also to increase demand by just wanting to pursue it, just for all the different reasons we have been talking a little bit tonight. So sorry, Karen, I know that you have trouble unmuting. I hope that can respond a little bit around your question, and thank you for the amazing work.
And Karen, it is looking more and more likely we will be able to start operating in Tanzania. So stay
Yes.
tuned.
Okay, I'll give a last call for questions if anyone wanted to come on or type in the chat. Going once, going twice. George, is that a hand raise or a wait or a hello? May have been.
The hand raise.
Okay, go for it.
So what I wanted to ask is, in the overall global context, how is the best approach being developed to express sovereignty of the girls and the women, their sensual capacity in relation to family planning and, just the procreation of life? What's the best way you found to integrate that into the program?
I guess, well, George, it's a very good question. I guess the critical issue, as I view it, is to change the mentality of men of owning the women as property to being equal partners with them, and to recognize the humanity of their wives and daughters. So, in Ethiopia, I visited the town of Ara Amba, founded by a man named Mr. Zumra 40 years ago. And he allowed people to move to the town only if they agreed to absolute gender equality in the home and in the workplace. Women and men working in the fields together, cleaning the house together, doing housework, working in the weaving mill together, and absolute nonviolence. And this was in a poor part of central Ethiopia. And men in other villages attacked him because they said, "We bought our wives, we have the right to beat them." And he basically said, "No, you do not, and you can't live in our village unless you agree to our terms." They are now sending all of their high school graduates through university, many University of Addis Ababa. They are giving financial aid to neighboring villages. They are living proof that gender equality and nonviolence works. And it's a role model for the nation of Ethiopia, but not enough Ethiopians are following that role model because it's not being publicized the way it should. But in our programs, we work to take men through a very gradual transition in their thinking about the humanity of the women in their families. Because if they start out thinking they own them and that they're property and that girls are a liability and the best thing to do, having fed them for 12 years, is to sell them into marriage, it can't be changed with a public service announcement. You've got to get people identifying with a charismatic male character who, like them, gets all kinds of advice on what to do and gradually finds their way into what everybody is now calling positive masculinity, where they are on an egalitarian basis. And one of the things men learn by listening to these programs is that, in fact, family life is much happier if you do that. Not to mention, and I'll go back to Ethiopia again, the man who was interviewed in a film by a film crew from Colorado, where he said he had not allowed any of his daughters to go to school. He had sold them all into marriage until his last one. Then he heard PMC's program. He decided to let his youngest daughter go to school. She got a degree in computer science. And he said, now she's supporting the entire family. I wish I had heard your program before I raised all my daughters. So, we're seeing that kind of change. It's not overnight, but we can measure real changes in men's attitudes. And that's, as I've said at the beginning of this session, it's one of the most critical things because in many societies, as we all know, men are making the decisions.
Thanks, Bill. Christina, we will close out with your question. Christina Hairlines, one of our awesome PMC board members. I will let you take it away.
You're on
Oh,
mute,
yeah, you're
Christina.
on mute, Christina.
We had the same problem with
There we go.
Karen.
Now it
Oh,
did.
there we go.
Now
Got
it
it.
Hi, hello, everybody. I was actually hoping to surprise you in Uganda on the heels of an event I was supposed to be at in Botswana. So this is a really nice consolation prize. So thank you. I'd love to hear, if we have a few minutes, a little bit more about your whole trip to Africa this time around and what you have cooking in the future. But I had just what might seem like an out of left field question. Have opportunities ever come up for PMC, or has PMC ever looked for opportunities to buy radio stations anywhere where it might make sense?
It is a little out of left field, but the answer is yes. There have been interest by some owners of radio stations to sell the PMC. What has kept us from doing that is the stations that people might want to sell are generally community stations with very small reach. And we want to be either nationwide or language region wide. So, buying a giant station that covers a good portion of a nation is financially out of our reach. So, we've certainly benefited a lot of radio stations, both by buying airtime, but also by training their personnel. So the joint program of UNICEF and UNFPA to end FGM, female genital mutilation, awarded us a 14-country project during the pandemic. And in 12 of those countries, we were training radio personnel on how to do the kind of programming we do. And in many countries also where we've had trained writers and directors involved with our programs, sometimes they are hired by the radio stations so they can produce their own programs similar to the ones we're doing. And we've had, when we do training workshops in the methodology, we also get a lot of radio personnel as well as people from the National University Drama Department coming to learn about how these programs work. So we haven't yet bought a radio station. If anybody knows a way we could buy a national broadcaster somewhere, I'd be interested to hear about it. But it's a big leap from our size right now.
And through our journey, Christina, I can probably complement a little bit. We've been, just visiting different partners, which are so important. A lot of them are very entrenched around human rights, around, prevention of protection of children, protection of women empowerment. So we've been having a lot of conversations with partners that definitely find us as an add value, which is great, just to be able to create these partnerships because they already are participating in big grants. We also had met in Kenya specifically because it's a hub for all East Africa. So it was very important to start there, our tour this time this year. We saw different hubs. So a lot of hubs appear from Kenya to see Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and South Sudan. So it's very interesting how just addressing some of them there and then coming here and meeting their peers, just opens doors much faster because we already have been connected toward the hubs. We also have been connecting with different communication companies as well, because we definitely, we want to be prepared to, address in a more holistic way. A lot of social media questions have been arising, as we're moving forward. And it's great to see, how people are seeing how we're moving with the times, how now we're talking about audio dramas instead of just radio dramas, because we're addressing the whole audio system, right? Through linear radio, digital radio, YouTube channels, that are reproducing also our shows. So just very interesting things and insight that we're also bringing to the all SBC space in order to, perform better work, also understanding. So it's been very interesting, a lot of next steps, a lot of things cooking. So definitely very hopeful that a lot of things will come this way. A lot of SBC specialists have been meeting with us, and definitely they are endorsing our work. So they are putting much more attention now that they had before, and a lot of feedback around other activities, that they have been doing that have not been successful. So definitely this is a good timing for PMC to show that, 25 years was just the beginning. We are evolving with the times, but we definitely have a very good structure and very principles that are founded through our methodology in order to just keep evolving with different formats, but just bring the very impactful results that we know that we can bring to the project. So that's a little, in a nutshell, what we've been up to, and we will continue. I mean, we are living until Saturday, so we will continue this journey. Tomorrow we have 4 other meetings, and it's been intense days, but very, very gratifying for us to just present together, the country, the inspiration, our president, and then, me just trying to complement also what we are doing and how we're moving forward.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I just want to say that it is always such a treat to hear, Bill's stories of, from such a long history of engagement with PMC. There's always a new nugget that comes out. And I love to be reminded about one of the things that drew me to PMC from the very beginning, which was this capacity building aspect. And I think that, it's become increasingly sort of trendy to engage local people in a sort of integrate local people from the foundation of a program, but PMC was doing it before anybody else was, and I think in a very deep and meaningful way. So it's great that we can measure our success from our programs, but there's so much more impact that PMC is having that we can't even necessarily.
Thanks, Christina. Thank you to Natty, Ronald, and Bill. This was a wonderful event. We did record it, so look for that in your inboxes. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we will get you connected. And have a great, wonderful rest of your day, evening, morning, wherever you are, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.